Thanks. It's always nice to give presentations in urban planning. My training, as Cecilia mentioned, is in urban planning. But for the past 2 decades or so, I've been doing lots of work right across the way at Bunch Hall, trying to participate in the development of a new department. And so it allows me to sustain myself, so to speak, when I'm able to share my work. The past 2 years have been especially interesting as chair of the department for all kinds of different reasons. And so when I was asked to do this, I readily accepted. I'm not sure if I accepted very, very fast, because I'm really terrible sometimes with email, getting back for these sorts of things. But I knew I was going to do it, and I'm really glad I am, because it really allowed me to further think about work that I've been doing for, about a decade now, more than a decade. And of course, when I first started doing my work on day labor, my natural inclination was to think about it within the context of informality, but then as I dig deeper into the work, which is really a privilege, right, to study something for a long, long, long time and really dig into it, my thinking has shifted, has shifted in how I think about where day labor is situated. So I have some prepared text, only in the beginning, and then I'll deviate. And the reason why I prepared in the beginning is because I really wanted to think about how I would present today's talk, and so indulge me as I begin. So I was asked to think of my work on day labor in what I think are both narrow and broadened or expansive perspective, right? The narrow is within the context, I think, of informality. It's a term used to describe a host of activities, economic and otherwise, that is increasingly gray in definition and I think reality. I'll not quibble with the most accepted definition other than to say that I think it's simple and it's narrow. It's usually framed as a market activity, which includes licit, but often in reference to illicit services or productions. Activities that fall under this realm are unregulated by the state, but very well known to them as well. Almost everybody knows about day labor. And I remember about 10 years ago, the government accounting office gives me a call because they wanted me to give them tours of different day labor sites because they were trying to do research, which is what GAO does. So when we speak of regulation within the context of informality, I think for most it means some form of oversight for the purposes of taxes, for reporting of abuses, and collection of other important data by the state. The broader or more expansive context that I was asked to consider is the nature of informality in the United States, including its prevalence, characteristics, rationale, advantages and disadvantages, and the social spatial implications. And I very much welcome that because doing so, it takes day labor, I think, out of the narrow realm of the definition of informality and allows for a more robust and therefore theoretically convincing framework, one that is so grounded, I think, in really 4 really key areas that I will attempt to weave my talk through, right? I think, so it's grounded in labor market reality, in local and community-based reactions and intervention, in minimal state and federal intervention, though there's clearly something afoot, particularly in the South, trying to curb activity via the supply side. And here I'm making references to all of that legislation being passed in Georgia, Alabama, and other parts to deal with arguably a broken immigration system. And so states are starting to get a little bit more involved with the issue of day labor. And then finally, in civil society, I think a force that's increasingly important in the United States. As a safety net further erodes and good employment opportunities diminish, and there's lots of other factors that help us understand the growth of civil society. So for my talk, what I'll do is I'll briefly situate day labor in the United States, including how I and a few other scholars think of this labor market exchange. I'll draw on my own work to summarize what we know of day labor, its demographics, its earnings, spatiality, and a few other key issues. And I'm really just going to go through this really, really quick. This is stuff. If you've ever read any of my work on day labor, I've already done that, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. I'll also include some of the informal characteristics that leads most to conclude that day labor is an informal activity. So here I'm suggesting that it's more complicated than that. I'll then talk about how different actors are indeed regulating this industry. And I put that regulation in quotes. I'll pay particular attention to the role of civil society in their use of worker centers. It's a type of regulation that differs, I think, markedly from what the state has done or maybe would do. I'll also close by sharing some of my thoughts on informality as a frame for understanding day labor and the more complicated and nuanced connections that day labor occupies in what I would argue is a broader political economy. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about in terms of day labor, here are some really interesting shots that I've taken over time. So what is day labor? Well, in a very, very technical sense, there are two types of day labor industries. And early in my thinking and in my research on day labor, I categorize actually as informal and formal. And here I'm making reference to the temporary staffing industry, right? That my good friend and colleague Nick Theodore, Jamie Peck, well-known, I think he's an English geographer has written about. And as terrible as that market is, it's a market that's nevertheless regulated by the state, right? Workers do have to pay taxes. They have to sign up. You have to have documents to be employed for most of these jobs. It's a burgeoning industry. It exists in LA in very great numbers, and also in Chicago. And then there's, of course, the day labor that I describe, or that I research, and I describe it as informal in part because there are very, very few regulations. And if you were to actually look at research, at the literature on day labor, the little literature, for example, with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's very clear that they describe not only this type of labor search as day labor, but also temporary staffing agencies as day labor, but also substitute teachers fall under the category of day labor. So, we have some definitional issues here that I think it's important to mention. Now, for the work that I've done on day labor, the definition that I use is workers who search for employment in public or open-air spaces such as street curbs and pilots, storefronts, or worker centers. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. What I do want to say is that looking for work in public spaces is a time-honored tradition in the United States and elsewhere in the world. Indeed, day labor has existed for centuries. I've read books where folks would gather at a common space, usually a park, and basically sell themselves for the day or for a couple of hours, right? We know that in the United States, day laborers can be traced back to at least 1780. Since at least the mid-1800s, shape-up sites, that's the name given to day labor hiring sites in New York and other Northeast ports, provided a system of hiring dock workers for the day by a seemingly arbitrary selection from a gathering of men. So the way it worked is that a foreman would emerge from, suppose, his office nearby the dock, and he would say, "Okay, guys, shape up." And that was a calling call for the men to form, semi-half circle, and then this person would literally, almost arbitrarily select what was called a gang, 6 to 8 men who were then given a 6-hour shift. And they were paid in cash at the end of that shift. And you usually had 4 shifts in a 24-hour period. So clearly, this is, I think, a form of day labor. If you know anything about the dock workers, the early dock workers, powerful unions long term. So very, very interesting, I think, historical connections to day labor. There's also, I think, really important popular or more contemporary connections to day labor, right? And, for example, this exchange was vividly captured in the movie Cinderella Man. Russell Crowe, who plays a boxer and also a dock worker, excuse me. And of course, the most famous U.S., I think, jornalero that I try to articulate is not Mexican, but rather Marlon Brando, right, who won an Academy Award for his role as day laborer. Temporary dock worker, to be specific. So I went to, I gave a presentation in Mexico City, so I thought I'd keep this slide in Spanish just a little bit because they really got a big kick out of this. And he is possibly the most famous day laborer. So clearly, both contemporary and historical connections to day labor, I think, is important to give this context of this market not being so narrowly defined as focused on just Mexican or Latino immigrants in the past 20 to 30 years. There really is much more nuances to this market and how it's been traded, how it's evolved in the past couple of decades. So how else do scholars think about day laborers? Or perhaps more specifically, how do I think about day labor in a broader theoretical construct? Well, clearly, I would be remiss if I did not talk about day labor within a broader globalization, immigration, and economic structure. I am, after all, trained in urban planning, and I have conversations with a lot of colleagues about how our economy has changed, how it's increasingly globalized, division of labor, and how that, of course, structures work, how they get paid, including men and women and other categories of workers. Immigration, I've always argued, wouldn't necessarily explain the increase of day labor in a contemporary context, because I'm pretty much convinced that if immigrants were to all of a sudden disappear, I think you'd see an increase of non-immigrants looking for work, and indeed about a quarter of day laborers are not immigrant and not Latino. So looking at how our economy has restructured and changed is really important for understanding this labor market. I'm much more convinced, and I've spent a lot more time really looking at contingent or non-standard employment. And of course, the way to think of that is the growth of not only self-employed, part-time work, some of course, the work that Chris Tilley has done, but the increasingly deteriorating or relationship between employers and workers. Right? We don't have that same 9-to-5 relationship in many industries, and of course, it's a very strategic move. There are still some firms, many firms and companies that do have this standard employee-employer relationship, but that's becoming less the case, and as a result, you have a huge spike in contingent non-standard employment. I argue that day labor, along with the temporary staffing agencies, at the bottom of that hierarchy, so to speak, of contingent and non-standard employment. Then, of course, there is labor demand and supply. One of my arguments that I made early on in my work is that if demand wasn't there, the workers would disappear. Well, we're going through a very difficult unemployment period, and if anything, we've seen increases in the number of workers looking for work in this manner. You do see less employers searching for workers in this way, but they still exist, and people are still getting some work in this industry. There are also other nuances and interesting things related to this perspective, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. And then, I just briefly share with you some of the historical connections that I've thought about and have written, and hopefully will be submitting to a press at the end of the summer. At least that's the plan. And then, of course, at the bottom, I list labor market informality. Now, this slide itself, I did not create just for this presentation, but rather I've done a similar talk, so to speak, in which I articulate or attempt to articulate how we think, or how I think. And I purposefully put labor market informality at the bottom, not so much because it isn't an informal activity per se, but rather that day labor really occupies a lot of interesting components of what I argue is a broader political economy if we're to think about where this market fits. Clearly there are some characteristics, and I'll talk about them a little bit later, but there are other aspects of this story, theoretical frame, or frames that really help us situate day labor in this context. So what do we know about day labor? Really, really briefly. Space obviously is important, right? I mean, men and a very small percentage of women search for work in this manner. When I say small, I'm talking about 2%, at least according to our national survey that was done in 2006. Space is important for different reasons. When I first started this work, for example, I categorized the market in 3 spatial configurations, if you want to call it that way. The first configuration I described as regulated. These were spaces that were sanctioned by a city, for example, a municipality, and run by a community-based organization. That's where civil society, of course, entered into the picture. And early in my thinking, I was impressed that these spaces allowed for employers and workers to come together to undertake this exchange. But I also found that there was lots of other really positive things about being a part of a regulated space or a worker center, right? Usually the workers were free from harassment. Shelter and bathrooms were provided. Really, really important, right? I recall when I first started again doing my work I went to Ladera Heights, and I was hanging out at about 7 o'clock, and then about 8 o'clock I started getting some hunger pangs, and so I went to McDonald's to get one of those big muffins and some coffee, and I did that, and then I came back and I asked a couple of the friends that I had made, and I asked them if they wanted anything, and a few of them said yeah, and then they told me that they weren't allowed to even purchase food at McDonald's or use the restroom, right? So clearly there was a lot of interesting dynamics at the local level that were going on, and so worker centers in many ways circumvent some of the difficulties that these workers undertake. Many of these worker centers provide tool exchanges and a wage dispute program. There's a lot of wage stuff that day laborers experience, and some of the more sophisticated worker centers, for example, have relationships with local law programs, right? And it's a great training ground for law students to file these wage claims. But it's fair to say that doesn't happen a whole lot. That is that many of these worker centers aren't that sophisticated to make connections with law schools, and that's because they're functioning on a very, very small budget, right? And if they had more resources, I'm convinced that worker centers would be much, much more effective. They offer ESL and other forms of adult education. Rules are developed and enforced by workers. Legal documents usually aren't required to stand or search for work through worker centers. Some sites require a standing fee, but that's becoming increasingly less the case because these guys earn such little resources, and it's a disincentive to stand or look for work at a worker center. And then finally, you have an orderly queuing process in place, and again, that might be a disincentive for workers, right? You imagine the market that's seemingly chaotic, right? That's not at a worker center, and all of a sudden you're asking a group of guys to go into an orderly space and queue up for a job. It's completely contrary to what they were doing prior to worker centers being created, and so there is an inherent conflict as a result of this form of regulated. Then two other types of spaces, and I'll go through these really quick, which I labeled unregulated. And here you have sites that were connected to a specific industry, right? So you might find day laborers hanging out at a Standard Brands or at a Home Depot, ostensibly to do work in the painting or in the home improvement industry. Men looking for work at street corners or parking lots. Some of these spaces had self-imposed regulations, but most of them were free-for-all. And if you were aggressive, if you jumped into a car, into a flatbed, you likely got the job. It's very difficult for some employers to discriminate and say, no, I don't want you, I want this puffier guy. It's a really interesting exchange that happens. The more experienced, the more seasoned employers are easily able to do that, but they're not always the ones that hire day laborers. In fact, in our national study, about half of employers are folks outside of the residential construction industry, right? Folks like myself who might need to prep the garage for painting or the house for painting, or who need help digging up a ditch because paying a plumber to do that will cost me 5 times the cost, and so I could really save a lot of money by hiring a day laborer or any other task that you might want a day laborer to do. What else? Day labor, national in scope. Obviously, that's not that great of a finding, but when I did the national study, that was one of the primary reasons why I was funded, right? To paint a national picture, work out the day labor exists outside of Los Angeles. It's also fair to say that Los Angeles is clearly the capital of day labor in the United States, though it doesn't beat Johannesburg in South Africa, which is a smaller city than Los Angeles, yet has many more day laborers and hiring sites. I'll go into that a little bit later. The demographics of day labor I've written about. Overwhelmingly male, undocumented, 75%. Impoverished Latino, there's a young mix of recently arrived and older day laborers. By that I mean length of stay, how long they've been in the United States. So that's also really interesting to me. Right here you have, well, I always found it interesting when I found a day laborer who had been in this country for 10 plus years, right, when they're looking for work in this way. I even thought it more interesting when I would find, for example, white surfers hanging out with Mexican day laborers in Malibu at that site, and these were surfers, and they lived for the big wave, and when the waves were small, they were trying to sustain themselves in this part of the economy. But they were clearly anomalies, right? There are some other really interesting bifurcated data points. For example, not all day laborers were uneducated. There was a good number of them that were, about a third. But then there was about a 20% of them that showed the survey had relatively high levels of education, college degrees, or some college experience. Earnings are terrible. When I first released findings, I was able to estimate that the median earnings was about $10 an hour. And of course, I said $10 an hour. This was 10 years ago. That's not that bad. But when you really think about the inconsistency of getting work, it really puts that into context. And it's clear that most men who work in this market year-round are living in below the poverty threshold. You don't make a good living day labor, and there's just no data to support that whatsoever. Lots of daily indignities and abuses. I'll talk about them really quickly. So, for example, there's high rates of wage theft. About 1 in 2 day laborers have experienced at least one incidence of wage theft 2 months prior to the survey. 19% reported suffering and injury requiring medical attention, about twice the rate of the construction industry. Many would work extra hours than what they had negotiated with their employer, and of course were not paid for those extra hours. Many were denied food and water and breaks. A lot of insults directed at day laborers, not only by their employers, but also by passerbys. Abandoned at work sites, right? And so some of you are thinking, well, that might not be that difficult, but I think it's better to think about being abandoned at a work site outside of the LA context, right? So in DC or in other places where you have suburban areas developing and growing, you had a lot of day laborers working in that industry where there wasn't a transportation infrastructure, right? So being abandoned at a work site means a whole lot when you don't have access back to your hiring site and or home. So lots of stories of that going on. And then finally, as I suggested, it exists outside of the United States. There's big global market for day labor. One of the beauties of this project was that I've been able to travel all over to try to document and to interview and to think about day labor outside of the United States. This is Johannesburg, South Africa, and you would think that this is right down the street here in Los Angeles, right? Up in flatbeds, hanging out, waiting for workers, advertising the tools and their skill set, just waiting for work in this market. I've also traveled to Tokyo, where they actually have a day labor union. What's really interesting about Tokyo is that you have a very forceful middleman, the Yakuza, which is roughly translated to mafia, Japanese mafia, who actually serve as brokers between employers and the day laborers until this day labor union stepped in. I remember waking up at about 4 o'clock in the morning the day after I arrived to go to the district of Sanya. And I was stunned, right? Hundreds of men hanging out on street corners waiting for work in identical fashion to day laborers looking for work here in Los Angeles. And so one of my earliest publications was a comparison of day laborers in Tokyo and Los Angeles. But here you see them basically coming together either to eat or to organize as part of this union. As an aside note, in Japan there's actually a journal that's devoted to day labor and homelessness. No such thing here in the United States. And the reason why it's a journal that looks at homelessness and day labor is because most day laborers in Japan are homeless. It carries a huge negative stigma in Japan, as does day labor. But there's a much more developed infrastructure of day labor in an academic context there. Just like informality is much more important and developed in Europe and in Latin America. Right? My work is so much more received, if you will, in an excited academic context than here in the United States. Relatively speaking, I've had a lot of fun sharing my work here in the States as well. I'm just saying that the literature really is much more sophisticated and developed. People have been thinking about these issues, I think, longer than they thought for. So, some of the characteristics of informality in the day labor market. Of course, it's cash-based and it's untaxed, both by employers and, of course, by the workers. In fact, one of the primary reasons why it exists. It's unregulated by federal and state governments and labor departments. We're beginning to see some movement by states, but here the regulation really is more in terms of trying to ban it as opposed to trying to tax it or register it, so to speak, by the state. It's like other forms of informality. It's ubiquitous. There's an aura of illegality to it, though that has not been determined. In other words, there's been some legal challenges to whether or not day laborers can search for employment, and courts have ruled that they have every right to search for protections afforded by the First Amendment, freedom of speech. Similar to how people are protected in Las Vegas, who are trying to let everybody know through a bullhorn, for example, that they're sinners in Las Vegas. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but there was a really important lawsuit that was filed against that sort of speech. And I think one of the findings was that you can't really use a bullhorn. You have to keep it at the lowest level if you're going to do that sort of free speech. And it was that same strategy that was used to defend the search for day labor, and that actually came from Tom Sines, who's now the head of Malda. It was a brilliant, I think, strategy, and it's held true over time in several different legal rulings. And then finally, one of the I think more important contributions with scholars in this literature is that of Sasuke Sawson, of course, who really put forth this notion that you can't not think of informal activities without linking it to formal activities. So most of the time talking about labor markets. But clearly, day labor is connected to growth industries in the formal economy, mostly the construction industry, but also moving, landscaping, and painting. Regulations, regulating and other interventions. What's the primary role, or this slide is meant to convey what really is going on at a local context, right? And in doing the national survey that I led in 2006, we were able to estimate about 1,200 hiring sites across the United States. And by and large, most municipalities, they're quite aware of this because there's always complaints about men, mostly men looking for work. But most of them will talk about it, and then they decide to do nothing about it. And it's a very, very specific policy. One can even argue that laissez-faire, right? You let the economy adjust on its own, right? If workers dry up, employers won't show up. Or Congress, right? If employers dry up, workers won't arrive. And there are other reasons why many municipalities do nothing. Some of them don't think it's worthwhile to intervene. Some of them don't think it's that bothersome. And those activities that do require, or those municipalities that do some intervention, it's oftentimes requires resources, right? As I already mentioned, there are some state and federal regulations that are starting to come out, again, mostly at the state level, though when Sensenbrenner was being discussed as part of immigration reform, there was a very, very specific clause about day labor worker centers as not being qualified areas where day laborers could register as temporary workers. If any of you are immigration scholars, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's lots of different things about that bill. So the feds also talk to some extent about regulating this market, perhaps not in the way that I described at the beginning of my talk in terms of tax collection, collecting data, and so forth, but in the context of an immigration reform bill. Most cities that decide to do something, they move to outright ban day labor. They do that through city ordinances, local legislation, police harassment or controls. I've sat on numerous panels with local enforcement, and overwhelmingly they tell me that think it's a colossal waste of time to be rounding up day laborers. They'd rather be doing or chasing real criminals. Only a few police said that, but clearly they don't like doing this, and it takes away resources and time from other sorts of policing activities. And then there's the development of creative programs, the creation of worker centers, and also organizing day laborers. And of course, this is a really, really exciting movement. I'm not sure I would call it a movement, but clearly advocates of day laborers will frame it that way. And it's very important because it's connected to civil society, and it's also connected to the Take Back the City movement, which is really, really important to understand. And it needs to be contextualized, especially in Los Angeles and New York and in other immigrant-rich cities where you have a strong or a stronger civil society, despite what Republicans say about community organizers. Right? It's just amazing to me how disparaging they are about community organizers. I never even thought about community organizers in such a negative way. I knew that that you wouldn't make a whole lot of money doing that, but to disparage them, occupational classification is really, really nasty and mean-spirited. Something about worker centers. A quick history. Worker centers aren't very old. They've only been around for a few years, right? So this represents about 60 worker centers. In 2006, we identified all known day labor worker centers, and that's because worker centers usually advertise, and some of them are registered. And we did interviews of most of these worker centers. But you can see that many of them have only existed for about a decade plus some years. The oldest ones, about 4 of them, existed before 1990. So we're really, really talking about an infant movement. And clearly, if you read the work of Janice Fine, I think she does a really, really good job of contextualizing worker centers as organizing strategies in response to lack of unions paying attention to non-standard employer-employee relationships. I mean, I think it's a little bit unfair to criticize unions that they've ignored these sorts of workers, in part because when they organize, they usually organize in a firm context. Like you go to a firm, you organize workers in that firm, then you have a union. Obviously, I'm simplifying here, and there are really interesting innovations that unions have done to increase their membership base, but clearly there was a broad set of workers that were really, really being treated poorly. And so folks, many came out of urban planning here at UCLA and in other parts of the country, participated in the creation of worker centers. LA is one of the clear incubation areas, if you will, with regards to worker centers of different types. Right? You have taxi cab worker centers. You have restaurant workers who have formed a worker center, one of the most powerful, interesting, and innovative, I think, worker centers in the country. I'm referring to the Restaurant Opportunity Center. They've just gone national, united, so now they're called Walk United, and they're winning, and they're making legislative inroads, and they're going to be drafting with Congress an increase in the tip minimum wage. Can anybody tell me what the tip minimum wage is? Does anybody know what it is? I'll tell you one thing. It's been around since 1991. Same wage. We don't have it here in California because our minimum wage is applied for all workers, right? But the tip minimum wage is $2.13, right? And so the way it works is if you're in a state that has a tip minimum wage, in theory, tips are supposed to make up the difference between the minimum wage and the tip minimum wage that the employer has to pay you. Well, there's something afoot, and there's hope that we'll get an increase in TC over that. I remain very skeptical that that's going to happen. And I've already made my last point. So you can see that there's a huge distribution of worker centers all across the country, with concentrations really in the East and West Coast and gateway cities for immigrants, but also I think it's much more connected actually to the very large urban cities, which are of course rich and full of immigrants. So what do day labor worker centers do? I think it's fair to say that the more sophisticated, better endowed in terms of resources, those with very creative and committed staff, are able to do each of these 4 prongs. But of the 60 or so worker centers that exist across the country, I would count about half a dozen who are able to do this with any measure of effectiveness. Nevertheless, when we interviewed staff of worker centers, we're trying to understand what it is that worker centers do beyond the brokering, if you will, of wages for employment. And so we know that, for example, many worker centers actually do set labor standards, right? So they prevent day laborers from exaggerating on their skill set. If you go to an informal site, a site where you don't have a worker center, and you ask for a bricklayer, and you'll say, who can lay bricks? Yes, all the guys who do this, right? Who can put up, build a fence? They're all going to raise their hand, in part because there's very little risk. And the thinking is that you can hopefully be trained. And truth be told, a lot of day labor work that's hired at worker centers or at non-worker centers isn't so much skilled work, but rather work to assist a skilled worker. So it's important to, nevertheless, identify labor standards for the workers, right? So that you're not providing false advertisement, if you will, for the employers. And the reason why they do that is because they want employers to go to worker centers, right? Worker centers would disappear if employers do not solicit workers over there. Virtually by going or by utilizing a worker center, you're also putting into check an employer who all of a sudden finds himself or herself in a more formal process of employing a day laborer, right? Going to a corner is a completely different experience than going to a worker center to solicit work. And so employers do think more than twice about what it is that they're going to do to the workers, right? If they're going to use them or not. And indeed, when we ran some models with data, we find that indignities and abuses really are curtailed as a result of getting work at worker centers. What we didn't find was a bump in wages or a bump in frequency of hiring, and I attribute that to the localness of worker centers, right? So if you're going to compete with guys at an informal site, you're not going to charge more than what the informal sites offer, right? In other words, wages are very much set in a very local context. But worker centers, I think, are making inroads, and some of them are able to set labor standards. And of course, if you look at the literature on informality, labor standards is an area that isn't captured, or isn't, not captured, but labor standards is an area that informality teaches us doesn't occur in informal activities. Policy advocacy and enforcement. There's a really interesting worker center in Maryland called Casa Maryland, and they've been very, very successful in getting the local city council to invest literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in the worker center. They've also have developed strong relationships with a few of the trades, so that now you can think of Casa Maryland as a local in training, right, where you have workers obtaining skills and then some pathway towards union work. And worker centers, there's a RED, or an organization of worker centers, and together they've lobbied and undertaken other activities that can be described as advocacy in various different contexts. Civic engagement. Lots of worker centers are involved in community relations, and the reason why they're involved in community relations is because there seems to be a lot of conflict, a lot of distrust between merchants, between residents, between day laborers, between employers, elected officials. And so they quickly figured out that they needed to be, if you will, better citizens in a local context. It also turns out, we found with our survey, that many day laborers actually live in the neighborhoods where they search for work. So being involved in civic engagement is both beneficial to the worker center, but it further integrates them in a community context in a very local level. And then finally, there's some very interesting cities that are wanting to connect some of their social service delivery to worker centers. Los Angeles at one point was very, very interested in doing that. This was based on the work of 7 years old. There have been other examples, New York and Maryland, where there's discussion between worker centers and social service delivery. So that's what they do. Let me share with you a couple of pictures. This is the Masawali Worker Center in Phoenix, Arizona. I put the ZA backwards because I think Arizona's pretty backwards. Of day labor. But this is a really, really amazing worker center, in part because it really relied on the volunteer workers. These tents are really amazing. I mean, they really do a good job of deflecting the sun in Phoenix. Searching for day labor in August is brutal. You get out there really, really early. You don't work beyond noon, maybe 1 o'clock. I remember when we tested the survey in Phoenix, getting back to the hotel around 6 o'clock, and they were talking about it, a cooling down period, right? I think it was 120 degrees, and it was going to cool down to 110. It was kind of, it's wacky, right? But you can see, this drive-through here. There's some really interesting development activities going here where women are selling foods, and the profits are split between the women and the worker center, socializing and other forms of activities going on. You have sites here. There's a lot of downtime at these worker centers, and so one of the things that I've tried articulating and arguing is how to use this downtime, right, in different creative ways that provide, for example, human capacity for the workers. And indeed, many of these worker centers do that as a way to improve the workers' capacity and hopefully transition to other sorts of employment. Okay. So, some concluding points. I think it's fair to say that day labor is very much regulated, though it's not necessarily of the type used to curtail or to control informality, right? I think when we think about regulations in an informal context, we're usually thinking about how we can either curtail or integrate it, how it can become a part of, for example, the formal exchange of certain activities, right? In the housing realm, having these add-ons, these additions that don't go through zoning, right? There's safety concerns, but there's also tax concerns for public offers and other issues. So when we talk about regulation, we're really talking about very, very specific activities that further enhance, I think, the relationship between the state and these activities. I think that really isn't the way to think about regulation in an informal context, and that's why I'm trying to argue that making broader links to a broader political economy helps us think and evolve our definitions or our notions of regulations, right? So, for example, actors in this regulation, in this broader context, local labor market regimes, right? So the creation of worker centers, I think, in part, is to try to further control the local context of day labor. If you ever talk to staffers that work with at worker centers, there's always this notion, this idea that you can get all the workers within a square mile to look for work in worker centers. And in reality, that just doesn't happen, because you're always going to have folks who don't want to go through this formal queuing process, right? And if you're an aggressive person, if you've developed some kind of clientele, it really does not benefit you to work at a worker center. It really benefits you to look for work at a corner, right? Nevertheless, worker centers are trying to better control the local economic regimes where they are located. Local and community-based reactions and interventions, another very, very important action, right? You have some places, Brea is one example, and Costa Mesa, where after the election of more, I suppose, conservative officials, they did away with the worker center that existed, right? So clearly, the local context is really, really important in terms of how day labor is regulated or not. It's still minimal, but increasingly is the state and the federal intervention role that I've already described. Civil society, as I mentioned, super, super important in terms of the regulation, in terms of providing workers with leadership roles, developing their levels of consciousness. I remember early on going to a couple of meetings at worker centers in which we would be in a room similar to this one in size, and we would spend, or at least the leaders of the National Day Labor Organizing Network, which is Pablo Novello, they would spend easily half an hour talking about the days happening in local newspapers, having to do with politics, having to do with issues of globalization, having to do with immigration, and the objective was really simple, and that's to develop the workers' level of consciousness, right? And of course, it was done strategically because they're trying to build the movement that is the advocates of it. And so, training and education is highly critical. So, civil society, I think, is important in terms of regulating, or at least improving, moving workers into better jobs or upgrading the day labor industry itself. And then, of course, you have the broader labor and immigrant movement. Those of you who are students of this, especially here in Los Angeles, knows that things are very exciting in this context, right? There are some victories that are being had. When we had the big protest several years ago, I mean, how amazing was that, right? And to see the millions of folks marching. One of the things that many people don't know, or maybe you do know, is that the National Day Labor Organizing Network was part of that, right? So you had groups of day laborers marching, and they would identify themselves either by the corner or by the worker center that they would stand by. So clearly, I think there's lots of different processes, broader notions of regulations that are going on in day labor. One last slide. So, one of the things that I think was very interesting about my assignment was to think about regulations and some of the benefits and might be some of the negative externalities. And so, wages and frequency of hire, I put an E because it's even. You don't see a bump or an increase as a result of worker centers being created. But you clearly see lots of positives, right? You see a decrease in wage theft and abuse. So that's a positive. A curtailment of daily indignities. Worker capacity development. Lots of interesting and exciting things going on. Next Sunday will actually be the national convening of day laborers here in Los Angeles. It's going to be a huge, huge 3-day conference. There's going to be literally hundreds of day laborers from all over the country coming together. Unheard of 10 years ago, right? But think about it, right? These are men, mostly men, who look for work and one of the most difficult ways coming together from across the country to organize, right, as part of this organization. So clearly, worker capacity development and local political empowerment is being created as a result of these forms of intervention. Strength in numbers and organizing. It turns out, well, it doesn't turn out, but it took several years. But the National Day Labor Organizing Network has an official, formal relationship with the AFL-CIO, and they're pumping in resources to the organization. They're also now part of the, if you want to call it, the mainstream labor movement. And there's talks about creating local unions from worker centers, again, for the single purpose of transitioning workers into the trades, right? So there's a lot of exciting things going on as a result of worker centers, and I think that is how we should be thinking about how this market is moving towards regulation. Worker centers, they're not the panacea that I'm suggesting here, because there are some conflicts, some issues, right? Labor market control, the queuing, it's hard to convince guys to participate in worker centers, and that's been one of the biggest conundrums that worker centers have had. There's been many, many discussions and meetings about a standing fee or a membership fee, right? Something that's super critical for the success of unions for lots of different philosophical and theoretical reasons, right? You buy into it, you take ownership of it, and so there's been a big, big, big debate there. It stifles go-it-alone psyche, right? This individualism, of course, that's so prevalent in our society, and truth be told, it's that aggressiveness, that individualism that really factors into one's employment prospects. I've done plenty of interviews with some of the day laborers who identify the veteranos, right? Those who have been day laboring for years. And if you talk to them or see them in action, they really, really understand this market, and their understanding of the market is to their advantage because they are able to get many, many more jobs. Worker centers really takes that away. And then finally, employment opportunities can be curtailed, right? There's only so many jobs in a given day. At the height of our construction boom when I started the study, actually started before that, we were able to summarize or look at data that suggested that some of the best worker centers were dispatching about 30% of workers per day. That number is nowhere near that anymore. And it was uneven, to be sure, but about a third of all workers would get hired on any given day participating in day labor. And so that was really, really important to the success of these worker centers. If guys aren't getting work, they're going to look for work in other ways, despite some of these other positives. And so the conflict between worker centers and workers is how do you convey and convince workers that many of these characteristics that are positive outweigh some of these negatives. And I think in the end, it's wages and frequency of hire that really compels most day laborers to either to leave the safety and these other characteristics that worker centers provide. So I think that the takeaway point is that thinking about regulation, I think, requires us to move away from this very, very specific notion of not only informality, but how planners, policymakers, and others think about regulation and are thinking of regulation in this broader, more nuanced, more complicated context, because day labor, I think, is equally nuanced and complex and embedded in our society, both historically and in a contemporary context. So I'll leave it at that and take some questions from the board.
Two unrelated questions. One is about the point you made about LA. I'd be interested in hearing a little more about why you think LA is such a big day labor center. What's different between LA and other cities? And the second thing is about regulation. I'm thinking about the European attitude, which is that for a long time the left in Europe has been strongly against informal employment, as you know, because of the link to the welfare state. Because in order to get the contributions to the welfare state, you have to get everyone into formal employment. So the part of their salary goes into health care, retirement, and all the other stuff, benefits you get. But after, for a long time that led to just pure repression, right? Where it was actually the left that was about repressing informal employment and sending the inspectors in to really go after informal workers because it was defending the welfare state. And when that started to not work anymore because reality creeped up on a very, at least in France, we have this very innovative solution, which is if I want to employ someone like a day laborer or even my housekeeper and have them covered, I go on the internet, I buy these things that are called employment service checks. And I order them and I pay for a certain value of them. That is, there's a face value that pays the worker. And then I put in my taxpayer contribution number or whatever it is. And it automatically will calculate the contributions that have to be made above the wage to health care, retirement credit, blah, 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 and all that. So, and then I pay, and I literally use them to pay the worker. So I write out a check to someone, 50 euros. That person takes it, and they deposit it in their bank account, and automatically the system does all the other stuff and bills me. And that's how it's done now. Now, it's not, there's still a lot of people under the radar screen, but you see how it kind of cuts into your regulation thing in a very, bureaucratically ingenious way.
Right.
And that's starting to spread throughout Europe.
Right. How much is the premium you pay?
You basically have to, in France, you have to about almost double the face value of your wage. If you pay someone 10 euros, it's going to cost you 20. That varies by country.
And there is no tax evasion, Michael? Can people don't do that and pay?
So here's the tricky thing. My housekeeper came to me one day and I said, Pamela, I'm paying you with these things. And she says, oh, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because my health care is already covered through my husband. And if you paid me, you pay me more tax. And I actually said, no, I'm not doing that because I have my values and I want to support the welfare state. But there is sometimes the workers who ask to not do that. But still, it's become something of a solution.
Right. Well,
not a perfect one, because you still have a lot of people who want to, as you know, want to be totally under the radar screen because of their immigration issues.
I'm a firm believer that we need to we need greater taxes, right? We need more coffers. More dollars in the coffers. And so, thinking about how to do that, I think requires certain principles, right? Like the one the president is promoting, of fairness, right? The one thing I would say about day labor that perhaps won't provide a satisfactory answer to your question is that we're talking about a relatively small market nationally as well as locally, right? So at most, I think we estimated about 25,000 day laborers here in Los Angeles. Nationally, about 120,000. Multiply that by 3 because we were very conservative in our estimates. We're still talking about a very small percentage of the total workforce. And then when you add that to what they earn, so how much would it contribute to tax coffers? Nonetheless, it's still important, I think, to think about how different segments of the informal economy can make contributions, right? The whole debate about legalizing marijuana, in part is because it would bring in a lot of revenues, right, to state coffers. So I think there is a role that for the state in trying to regulate some of these industries. If anything, for some of the reasons that you also suggest about more dollars that can then be pumped in other areas, right? Social safety net, right? Education, higher education, and so forth. I'm not sure that investing, so to speak, in such a streamlined process will pay the dividends. And I think in an increasingly cost-benefit kind of bureaucratic policy frames, the state is probably going to say, well, doing such a system isn't going to really yield the results that we need. And some of this comes from having some conversations with legislators and others about how we possibly regulate this. And then when they hear about the numbers, they almost become dismissive. Oh, gosh, we're only talking about 25,000 workers in Los Angeles. And so it's almost a way for them to move on to a more important informal industry that they could possibly regulate. I really do think that day labor, as ubiquitous as it is, falls under the radar of most folks, including policymakers and legislators. So again, I'm not sure that answered your question. Now, back to the first part of your question about Los Angeles and why it's the capital, why I articulated as that. If you recall the graph where I showed the history of worker centers, right, or the short history of worker centers, those 4 worker centers that were created before 1990, 2 of them belong here in Los Angeles. Los Angeles also has the largest number of worker centers. A few years ago, they were investing upwards of $1 million yearly in running about 10 worker centers. Right? So if you divide that by 10, it's about $100,000, which is still a shoestring budget. But it provided the infrastructure for space, maybe a trailer, support for hiring staff, and so there was lots of activities in LA that people could articulate as promoting or safeguarding this market. We also, of course, had a sanctuary agreement where police would not raid worker centers for ICE or undocumented immigrant purposes. I also think that the housing boom was particularly, for lack of a better term, pernicious here in Los Angeles, right? I mean, everybody was either buying a new home or building a new home or refurbishing their own home. And it was a lot cheaper to do so with day labor. I think the growth of Home Depot is in part connected to that as well, right? There was a lot of folks like myself who thought you could do this home repair job in, a couple of days, or in my case, in a couple of hours, and then figure out I'm in over my head, right? So I go back to Home Depot and I hire a couple of guys to help me do that. So, there was, I think, a lot of important factors that I think made LA really, really unique. After our very anti-immigrant, I guess, Arizona era, I think those of us who were much more sensitive, if you will, to immigration, really started thinking about this labor exchange as part of our day-to-day culture, right? I remember giving a talk in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan, and I had a couple of people ask me if women would hire day laborers, and of course suggesting that how could women hire these guys, roughly looking immigrants, to go and do some work at their home, right? They completely thought it was a very risky and dangerous thing, and I guess on the face of it, it probably is, except when you get to really know many of these workers, right? They're hardworking folks, and I imagine some crime occurs. I did some research on violence that occurred between day laborers and against day laborers, but I don't think it's as scary to many Angelinos to hire immigrant day laborers as it might be to other parts of the country. Not to be sure, there are regions like the South that are burgeoning with day labor sites, right? Atlanta, I remember when we did our national study, we identified about 6 sites. When we arrived, we found another like dozen, and so we had to stockpile an area and send more resources there so we could survey more day laborers. But they're going to, they were undergoing much more difficult conflict over day labor, and so I would argue that the context of reception for day labor is much different in different regions of the country. In LA, I think that the context of reception after the Prop 209 and other anti-immigrant legislation that passed the state moved into a kinder, more friendly state, if you will. Arizona, things have dried up with day labor, especially after the bill that explicitly targeted both worker centers and day laborers and employers. So these legislative actions do have an effect, and I imagine things are probably slowing down in Alabama and Georgia, again, regions that have seen a growth in day labor. So local politics, state politics, I think do play into this issue. In LA, we underwent that really difficult turmoil much sooner than we did than these other parts. Plus, I think we're finally coming to grips, I think, in LA and in California, that we're very much like New York, right, in terms of context of immigration and reception, right? When you go to New York, you had folks like Giuliani, right? Send us all your illegal immigrants. I'm not sure if you recall, he actually said that once. I think it was during the debate of Prop 209, right? Unheard of, right? Especially coming from Giuliani. But when you talk about immigrants in New York, it's a much different context, right? People almost talk about it with pride. Oh yes, my parents came through Ellis Island, and you go to Queens for the most part. I mean, it's a different context of diversity and appreciation, to simplify it. I think we're starting to see some of that in Los Angeles. It's become a greater part of our fabric, and so I suspect that also explains in part why LA is the capital. And then, of course, just basic demographics. We have the largest number of sites and the largest number of men who look for work in this manner. We beat out New York by more than 50% in Texas, and as I mentioned, parts of the South. It just doesn't compare. Yeah.
I was just going to ask if you think that has at all to do with I don't know the figures, but it seems like in New York it would be people of different ethnicities or coming from more different places than in LA?
Right, there's Brazilian day laborers
And also like Eastern European and...
Right, there's some of that, Eastern Europeans, and there's actually there was a group of Sikh Indians who had their own spot that they couldn't get any of them to talk to us. We even hired co-ethnics, grad students, and they made very little inroads there. A few Asian day laborers and Queens. So yes, you're right. It is more diverse, but relatively speaking, you might think of it as about 20% other, and then 80% Latino, right? So, but here in Los Angeles, it's more like 95%, Latino, 5%.
Yeah, I was wondering, well, under the current recession, we know that an industry that has been affected is construction. So
Right.
I know that your study was 2006, but do you have any insights as to how, if the numbers have been decreasing? I mean, are former day laborers looking other types of possible jobs, or how is this affecting?
This is mostly based on anecdotal evidence. Right? Talking to whenever I go to any different on my trips, I usually try to visit one or two hiring sites and ask questions like that. So one of the things that we are seeing more men looking for work, and we're seeing more non-immigrants, non-Latinos also looking for work. And of course, that's a direct result of increases in unemployment, and of course the decline of the construction industry as a result of the housing bubble bursting. Right? We're starting to see an increase, right? But again, it's hard to measure nationally, right? So, we're beginning to see an increase, for example, in Las Vegas, right? We're beginning to see in LA more workers finding work. But again, I don't want to say a whole lot because I don't have that empirical evidence. But going to different parts of the country and talking to day laborers and people who organize day laborers, that's a pretty good data source. When we have the national convening, and in about a week, I'm going to certainly talk to folks about that and listen attentively so that I can further assess that. I think that would be a good reflection about this upswing that we're seeing in the economy, right? To what extent our day laborers start to get more work. It seems to be cool to see how that goes. Yeah.
It's one last question because I know that it's getting very.
Oh, excuse me?
I need this.
Oh, okay.
Can we have one last question? Close enough.
So you mentioned that 2% of day laborers are women.
Yeah.
And I would suspect because of this very public aspect of the work, and we know that a lot of undocumented women are employed in unstable employment inside.
Right.
And is there any growing movement to protect those kinds of workers? Or centers for maids and cleaners and...
I'm working with a really talented grad student in New York. I'm looking at female day labor centers, or not centers, but sites where women look for work. And some of the interviews that I've done of women at some of the worker centers, they all want to work construction, in part because it pays well, and they'll articulate their skill set in that area, their experience. But it turns out that employers of day laborers don't want to hire women. It's just a simple, discriminatory answer to that question. Again, because of the women that I interviewed, they would much rather do that than clean a house or care for children or for food. And these are the women that look for this type of work. In New York, at these two sites, it is segregated or concentrated in this other type of work, right? Non-construction work, caring for children, cooking, and so forth. And yes, there are some groups, advocates, who are trying to protect their interests, and of course other issues that women might confront in this very public search.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.